I feel like I should apologize to the Simpsons Wrestling. Well, I still think it's one of the worst wrestling games on the PS1. WCW Nitro is pretty terrible and probably worse. Spoiler alert, I played Thunder as well. That one's worse than the Simpsons Wrestling, too. So we're going to be looking at Nitro today. It feels like an arcade game with how stripped down it is. This is one of the games I remember seeing in the different video game stores or even like big box retail stores, and it just always sat there and I never had an interest in playing it. Now that I have played it, I wish I hadn't. This game was released in 1998. It was supposed to be released in 1997, but a considerably better game, WCW vs. the World, was still selling well, so Nitro got delayed until the following year. For a game that was released in 98, I was expecting way more than what I got. There are very few things to really do in this game. While it looks very good, that's about it. It's a pretty boring wrestling game. It was made by Inland Productions and published by THQ. Inland Productions was a relatively unknown and really only active for a few years developer. They worked with THQ on a few different games. They really didn't do too much. This was the first wrestling game that they did. The second one would be Thunder, and then they were pretty much gone from the industry. Inland Productions worked with a few other publishers as well, like EA and Ubisoft. None of their games were really well reviewed. They released 7 games as far as I can tell. They might have been working on some other ones, but I wasn't able to see that. Regardless, it's one of those companies that put out a bunch of stuff, tried really hard, but never really found their footing, at least from what I can tell. They didn't have a very great start either because they got sued by the former people that the founders worked for. And yeah, that's a whole nother story that isn't really part of what we're talking about here. I'm just going to skip a section on story because there isn't one in this game. I would have expected there to be something close to it, but yeah, it's not there. So how can I best describe the gameplay? It's awful and clunky. Those are the 2 words that come to mind. If I had bothered to rent this game when it came out, I would have been incredibly disappointed. It would have just blended in with all the other bad weekend rental games that I had, and then I would have forgotten about it. The gameplay is just pretty bad. It's something that I would have expected to see on one of the LJN games on the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis. Now, the roster is pretty great. It really reflects how great the wrestlers were in WCW. You've got Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Sting, Lex Luger, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, The Giant, DDP, Booker T, Stevie Ray, Alex Ray, Chris Benoit, Randy Savage, wow, okay, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Syxx. Now, it's really awesome, and I really wish other games had done this. You get little promos when you're on the character select screen, and that's pretty great. And you also have a second promo from Alex Wright and Eddie Guerrero where they do their promo again in their native language. So that's kind of fun. And then shit goes downhill when you start playing the game. I think the game that I would compare this one to the most would be WWF Warzone. That game has kind of clunky controls just because you have to open up this menu to figure out what you can do, and then it might take a little while to get some of the button movements down. The biggest difference is that game was at least somewhat fun to go back and play, and Nitro was just shit. There are 5 game modes in it. 3 are single player, 2 are 2-player. And it feels an awful lot like an arcade game, but a really terrible one. I would actually say that WWF In Your House and WWF WrestleMania the Arcade are both better than this, which is pretty frickin' sad. So what can you do in this game? You can play a tournament, you can do an exhibition, you've got a 2-player mode, so basically fight your friend, assuming that you have a friend who wants to play this with you, and then you can do a tag team exhibition match, or you can do a tag team match with your friend, again, assuming that you have one who wants to play WCW Nitro with you. And then after you play this, I'm assuming they won't want to be your friend anymore. But hey, who knows? The tournament mode is really the main draw here. It's just a 10-man gauntlet match. I don't know why they call it a tournament, but it's a 10-man gauntlet match. You're going after the heavyweight championship here. The manual doesn't actually clarify what championship you're going after, so I'm assuming it's the heavyweight championship. Unless Hulk Hogan woke up that day and just decided, I want to win the TV title and just hold that forever. Which is possible. You never know. Each wrestler has the same moves. They do have 3 signature moves, but all of the basics are essentially the same. So everybody's going to be able to do a powerbomb or a pile driver or an abdominal stretch, and you can actually win a freaking game by just doing abdominal stretches over and over again. It's kind of shit, but at least there's some way for you to try to win this. Assuming that you want to go through a 10-man gauntlet match, which maybe you do. Each special move requires a condition to be met. This can be having the opponent on the mat with low energy, or just having them with low energy. The game does not have a stun condition that I found, so when you're punching your opponent in the face repeatedly, they're not just going to become stunned for a few seconds. There's also no lockups, which is really bizarre for a wrestling game. Many wrestling games kind of toe the line between being a sports game and a fighting game just because that's how you have to do it with this. In this case, WCW Nitro, it leaned too far into the fighting game side of things, and it just kind of resulted in a bad game. I really, really don't like the gameplay at all. It was just really awful, and it took me forever to just get the hang of the game so that I could win a frickin' match. It felt really slow, really clunky, and I don't think my opponents could hit me or I could hit them most of the time. It just felt like both wrestlers were drunk and stumbling around. One thing that I forgot to mention is you have run-ins in this game. So those are kind of fun. They actually help out a lot when you're trying to figure out how to just play the goddamn game. So you can call in your buddy, they'll run down and really just get out of the way and let them beat the shit out of your opponent for a while. It just felt a little stupid when I was playing this. I'm sorry. I have very little to say about the gameplay that was even remotely positive. And even now, I'm just trying to dig something up. The run-ins were fun, but since there's no storylines, they don't mean anything. Here's something positive that I can talk about, even if it also has to get hamstrung by other things that the game's missing. I think the graphics are actually pretty good for 1998. The characters look great. You don't have the same kind of blocky textures that you had with WCW vs. the World, and things look pretty good. The ring looks great, the crowd looks alright, it sort of reflects what WCW would become, where you can't really see a crowd, but they're kind of there, so that's cool. The camera spinning around isn't the worst thing in the world. It kind of works in some cases. I'd say the overall presentation is pretty good. The fact that there aren't ring entrances is kind of crap, but they do sort of deal with that a little bit, where you do get some pretty good pictures of the wrestlers, or at least who you're going to fight, and then when you lose, you get that little thing where you get not wheelchaired out, but stretchered out of the ring, so that's kind of fun. there are fun things in this. The promos were kind of cool to see those. It's really great to see certain parts of this, and then you have to start playing the game and you realize, wow, this is really bad. The animations on the moves does look really good, even if it creates some hilarious moments where you're seeing like Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan doing a Hurricanrana, where you're like, okay, that would never freaking happen. Like, nobody is calling that spot for those guys. And yeah, that's kind of funny, especially when you see the Giant or Kevin Nash with their oversized character models doing something that they probably shouldn't be doing. So it creates funny moments. I don't think that's what the developer wanted, but it does create some really funny moments. And I do like the fact that they made the Giant and Kevin Nash look bigger than the other sprites, or not other sprites, the other character models, because that's the way they should look. When we look at WCW Thunder in a little bit, we'll see how they fuck that up later. But right now, it looks pretty good. I'm glad I didn't play this game as a kid. I really don't think I missed out on anything, because this is not some hidden classic or a game that needed another look to reevaluate it or something like that. It's just a bad wrestling game. Maybe this would have been fun for someone back in 1998. Like, if this was your first wrestling game ever, I could see somebody enjoying this for a little bit. But then if they kept playing wrestling games, they would probably realize that this one doesn't really match up, and it isn't as much fun as something like SmackDown or WCW vs. the World or many of the other games that are on the N64 and the PS1. So yeah, somebody out there has fond memories of playing this game. I'm sure of it. But that's not me, and I don't think this game is worth it. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.